Joining us now, a familiar voice and personality here on 105.3 The Fan. Did the pre- and post-game show on Cowboys Radio Network for some years with Brian, and did other things around the halls here at 105.3 The Fan. It's Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio. You can listen on the TuneIn app. And good afternoon, sir. How the heck are you?
I'm great. How are you, bud? Long time no talk. In fact, it's funny. We do our show out of the Fan Studios every morning, so I'm there every day now, 7 to 10 a.m.
Yeah, I keep expecting to see you when I step in about 12:30 or so every day. But how's it going? Year one, talking Big 12 with no Texas and OU. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different animal. Obviously, in where we live, those are two huge brands. I mean, you could argue, aside from Texas Tech and maybe Baylor, that there's no, larger fan bases in the DFW Metroplex than Texas and OU. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a huge deal. But Colorado, from a brand perspective, has really slid in, and I mean, they're legit. I mean, that is as good of a team and program, in terms of the growth. What Deion has done is incredible, and obviously his son and Travis Hunter play a huge role in that. But I'm not going to lie, the idea of the Cowboys maybe being in tank mode and then Shedeur Sanders potentially being, a guy that could get drafted, I don't know if they're going to be that bad, but, you might shoot for that because Shedeur is legit, man. And having another Sanders in Dallas would be incredible.
Yeah, do you think that could work with prime coaching and Shedeur playing? I mean, what all would come along with that?
I mean, look, this is a guy that has taken an absolute beating as the quarterback of Colorado. Last year, he sustained 60 sacks. Okay? Mm-hmm. I mean, he took an absolute beating. In 12 games, 60 sacks. I mean, think about that. And his numbers, despite that, are incredible. I mean, he put up big-time numbers, low interception numbers. So this is a guy that, has proven over the last couple of years that you can beat him up as much as you want. He's going to still get up and make throws. And, I mean, there's definitely some, prima donna there, and he's very similar to his dad in that regard and, probably grew up a lot differently than his dad did. But what he's done this year, too, I mean, he was sacked a ton at the beginning of the year. They've really figured out how to protect him a little bit in their offensive line, and that's the biggest reason why they're now on bowl eligible and pushing for the potential playoff spot here, ranked 20th in the first CFP rankings.
Going into Lubbock this weekend to take on Texas Tech, how do you see that one going, Ari?
Yeah, that's I think aside from the Holy War, which is now a Big 12 game. How crazy is that? BYU Utah.
It's amazing.
It's complete
with a Jewish quarterback in BYU.
BYU sitting with a first-round bye in the college football playoff.
Right. BYU is first-round bye in the college football playoff with a Jewish quarterback in 2024. And Utah, who was a top 10 team preseason, expected to win the Big 12 year one. They're just 1-4 in the midst of a 4-game losing streak and questions about Kyle Whittingham in terms of their future. But so aside from that, which is obviously a huge rivalry game, this is the game of the weekend in the Big 12. And there's a huge Dallas tie to this game too, with Joey McGuire having coached at Cedar Hill. Yeah. He actually coached Bucky Deion's son years ago at Cedar Hill. And then, Deion has talked this week at length about how Joey McGuire was the grand poobah of Dallas area high school football coaches, and how, when Deion stepped in as one of those, that Joey was extremely welcoming and, gracious and helpful. And, so how ironic is that essentially, two former Dallas high school football coaches are now coaching in the Big 12 against each other. One of them, of course, is Deion, and the other is Joey McGuire for Texas Tech. And look, Texas Tech lost 2 straight to TCU and Baylor, but since then they bounced back with a huge win last week against Iowa State. But Colorado's coming off a bye. It's their second bye of the season. Every team in the Big 12 gets that second bye this year. And so I think that's a huge advantage, even though they're going into Lubbock. It's going to be a raucous environment. The last time that Texas Tech beat a team that was at least 7-0 was Texas back in 2008 in that iconic game with Michael Crabtree. So, look, I mean, Texas Tech under Joey McGuire has not been, exactly Mike Leach per se, but I mean, at 6-3 now, they're pushing their third consecutive plus 500 season in the Big 12 and looking for more. And aside from this game, their schedule opens up, and same with Colorado, which is why I think a lot of people like Colorado as a potential playoff team here.
Hey, Ari, I just wanted to know what the identity of the BYU team is this year.
Well, Brian, Kalani Sitake is all about that stuff.
He is all about that identity, for sure.
He is all about culture building and identity. That's a throwback, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
But, I mean, look, when you looked at BYU's roster coming into this season, and obviously, Brian, you follow this stuff because your depth of knowledge in the draft and college players is huge. Like they didn't have, like, based on personnel, there was no way anybody could have seen this season coming for BYU.
Sure.
Because they basically bring back everybody from a team last year that was really, really bad, especially on defense.
Yeah.
Well, Jay Hill, who was at Weber State as the head coach and now takes over in year 2 as the defensive coordinator for BYU, and Kalani and he both coached at Utah previously. It's really taken. I mean, that's the thing is their defense was atrocious last year. Year 2 under Jay Hill, it's really taken in a way. So a lot of these guys took a huge step forward. So, that's been the biggest piece to success for BYU this year. Do I think they're going to end the season undefeated? No, I do not. I do not think that. And while they shouldn't lose this weekend, this is kind of how it works at the end of a college football season when you've got teams that haven't lost yet. Like every week is a different mountain to climb. And even if the team in the standings is far below them, it just doesn't make a difference, and especially in a rivalry game like this. But, yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that about BYU because they really are, like, culturally – that's been the difference. It's not a personnel change. I mean, this was a bad team last year. It's basically the same team, just the coaching has been so much better and probably more in line with what they're doing this year in terms of their success.
Talking with our buddy Ari Temkin here in the GBag Nation. What are your thoughts on TCU? I mean, ever since they make that unbelievable run in the national championship, it seems like things have not quite gone as planned.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because sort of the area teams in the Big 12, if you will, TCU, Texas Tech, and Baylor have been so up and down this season, and it's like a round robin. They've all beaten each other up, and there's no rhyme or reason for it. I mean, look, the game last week was a really tough loss, but then it came on the heels of a really awesome win for them against Texas Tech, kind of what I was just alluding to. Josh Hoover, their quarterback, is probably the best quarterback in the country that you've never heard about. Obviously, people locally have because they follow TCU, but like he's been really, really good all year. The issue is he started off the year, I think, without throwing an interception after his first 3 or 4 games, and he's thrown a lot more interceptions of late. But that's what happens when you have no depth in terms of your running game. Like they don't have any balance at all. They cannot run the football, and so they're throwing the ball a ton. And going back to your question, Zach, like the issue with TCU is when they made that magical run in Sonny Dykes' first year, like it was great, great offensive line, great quarterback play, really good receivers, depth at running back. They had a great defense. Like they have not put it together defensively. Now, a big part of that for me this year is Andy Avalos comes in, really good defensive mind, but a dramatic shift from what they had been doing. They were really a odd front, 3-down front, and now in Andy Avalos' system, they're more of that traditional 4-man front. And so do they have the personnel on the defensive line to run that, or is it going to take a few years? So, like, when you look at the first 6-7 games of the season, and, it wasn't working defensively. And I would attribute a lot of that to year one in a brand-new defensive front without having the personnel to do it. And, look, they've been a lot better of late. So you hope that you see some consistency. But, I mean, it's like it's anything in football. You see it once, it's an anomaly. You see it multiple times, it becomes a pattern. And that's the biggest thing with TCU's defense.
Well, and now, Ari, you have Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy and the Cowboys coming to Fort Worth this weekend. Just how ridiculous has the fallout been from the Mike Gundy comments? Does he have any more fans there that have respect for him?
Yeah, I mean, how ridiculous are those comments? I mean, what would have happened if any other coach had said the same thing? What happens if Dion says that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable how, just tone deaf and crazy those comments were. And look, this season is unprecedented for Oklahoma State. It's funny because Vegas didn't really catch up to how bad Oklahoma State was, and they still were favored in lines where they shouldn't have been, and everybody just picked them because it's like, well, no way they start the season 0-4 in conference play. No way they start the season 0-5 in conference play. No way they start the season 0-6 in conference play. Like, if you take the history out of it, they're a really bad football team. And, I mean, their defense was bad last year. They gave up a ton of yards. The difference was they had a splash play guy on the defensive end with Colin Oliver. Well, Oliver's been out all year, and so has their best tackler at linebacker in Nick Martin. So it's like they're basically the same team last year. The difference being that the Doak Walker Award winner and Ollie Gordon has had a really down year, and their 2 defensive splash players have been out all year. So it's like they're basically the same team, but how much different are things at quarterback position? You've got a 2,000-yard rusher essentially. And then on defense, again, when you got guys that can make up for giving up a ton of yardage. So, I mean, that's where we're at. They can't stop anybody on the ground. I mean, it's unbelievable what they're doing defensively on the ground, like 300-plus yards, 400-plus yards. And on top of that, they can't run the ball. So, I mean, it's like they've got a bad offense. They can't move the ball. They can't run the ball, and they can't stop anybody. And this is really unprecedented. In Mike Gundy's first year in 2005, they lost 7 Big 12 games, did not make a bowl, and finished under 500. In the 18 years since then, they have finished over 500 every single season and made a bowl game in every single season. And the most losses they've had since that first year in conference was 6. They're 0-6, guys, and there's nothing that on paper that looks like they can win a football game this year in the Big 12. Like, I look at the rest of their schedule, and I don't see how they win a game unless something crazy happens. So, yeah, I mean, an 18-year streak is about to end this year in terms of finishing over 500, getting to a bowl game, and a all-time loss record for Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State.
Are we talking hot seat stuff at all? Is there no chance he's going to be gone?
I mean, Barry Trammell, who's covered Oklahoma sports for a long time, he wrote for the Tulsa World yesterday, basically questioning whether or not Mike Gundy wants to continue to coach. He's constantly criticizing the NIL world and the transfer portal, and it's like, look, if you can complain about it, but you got to deal with it. Like that's just the nature of the beast. And if you don't want to deal with that, then get out. There are a lot of coaches that have done that. A lot of really good coaches in basketball and in college football that have jumped because of that. So, I think that question remains. Now, Mike Gundy has enough credibility there, both as a player and coach, that he kind of gets to decide his own timeline. So, I think it's a question he's got to ask himself this offseason. But look, if they have a really down year this year, if they have another down year next year, suddenly the arithmetic may change a little bit in terms of, his decision. And again, his comments, like the president of the university had to come out and release a statement basically dispelling those comments. So, I mean, that's going to hurt your credibility a little bit internally.
No, 18 years. That's why he said what he said, because some of these coaches live in such a bubble that they do, outside it just doesn't, they don't have any understanding of really what goes on in the outside world. So they can make comments like that and not feel like there's any ramifications because, well, I'm the football coach here. I've won 18 straight years. Nobody's going to touch me. That's
totally
why these
right,
coaches, that's why these coaches they do what they do. That's why they make the statements that they do.
And they're to your point, they're in such a vacuum, and they're so inundated with how good they are and how good their programs are and how important their programs are within the grand scheme of things that you're right, they lose complete sight of any sort of reality or resemblance of reality. It's crazy. And look, it's sort of wild because there's parallels between he and Kyle Whittingham at Utah. And, Whittingham has already named Morgan Scalley, their longtime defensive coordinator, as the head coach in waiting. He famously said in 2021 he wasn't going to coach. He wasn't going to coach at the age of 65. He's going to be 65 next month.
Right.
And they've had a dreadful year. They've been awful. So it's two teams that were. I mean, it's sort of interesting. 4 of the top 5 teams in the preseason poll of the Big 12 are 4 of the worst 5 teams in the Big 12 right now. That's Kansas, Arizona, Oklahoma State, and Utah. And those two, at the parallel between Whittingham and Gundy, came in coaching in 2005, the same exact year. So, I mean, it's the parallels there, too, in terms of could this be the last year for both of them? And I think, the answer at this point in time is maybe.
That Lance Leopold, man, at Kansas, wow, that thing's kind of gone south, huh?
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback, this is a guy that was really, really good a couple of years ago who got hurt and missed all of last season. Jason Bean stepped in, was phenomenal for Kansas, helping them get to a 9-win season. But, Andy Kotelnicki, their really talented offensive coordinator, went this offseason to Penn State.
Okay.
And they have not been able to replace him. Jeff Grimes came over from Baylor. They talked all offseason about trying to keep things the same schematically, but you just can't. I mean, I hate that idea or notion from teams. It's always a disaster. When you got to change, I understand the familiarity, but you've got to change things over to this new staff. Otherwise, you're kind of like half pregnant in a sense. So I think that's what's gone wrong with them. But also, it's crazy. Like they played, I think it's like their last 5 losses have been decided by 13 total points.
Wow.
So they're just losing in the margins in every way.
What did you think about TCU's big comeback win over BYU in the semifinals of the women's soccer tournament?
It was a huge win.
Yeah.
And sets up a Saturday matchup, Gavin, with my Jayhawks, the 6th seed, who need to win in order to get that automatic bid into the NCAA tournament.
You're the man.
TCU's in. They're one of the best programs in women's soccer. That's how deep my Big 12 knowledge goes, guys.
I love it.
Very impressive, Ari.
Real quick, since you're a big Kansas guy, did you know about the Mark Mangino Tal intern situation?
Yeah, with the wiping
poop.
his rear end, with towels. Yeah, that's just the tip of the iceberg, guys.
We'll have to have you back soon for the rest of that iceberg.
Seriously, man, we're going to get some more details on that.
Thank you, Ari.
Take care, guys.